Hello everyone and welcome back to the GeekWave. This is the low budget show. It's the show so low it has no budget. And unfortunately, this show has been kind of trapped within a bunch of different mergers and the universe is restarting. And we were on this really interesting network to begin with, like a streaming service solely for this show and shows that will exist within this universe. But unfortunately, that didn't really pan out for this show, so it kind of went to another network, and it didn't really pan out there because there was a huge merger, and then it kind of was like lost in the shuffle of all these different mergers, and like the last couple episodes of the show people thought were lost to time, but in actuality, they just needed to find their footing somewhere else. Yeah, it's the Doom Patrol hour, everybody. We're talking Doom Patrol today. Dare I say, my favorite live-action comic book thing ever made? Dare I say it? Dare I say one of my, oh my god, I could maybe slot this into my top 10 television programs of all time. Dare I say it? Dare I say it? Dare I say it? I love Doom Patrol. I think this show is phenomenal. We are going to get right into it to talk about it. Unfortunately, we have a couple pieces of news, so you'll have to sit through that, or you can skip it if you want. There's always time codes. If you don't want to hear about a couple of trailers or some interesting stuff happening at Marvel or whatever, then you don't have to listen. You don't have to listen. It's fine. Let's start with this, though. We do have some Marvel news to begin with, which is a trailer, folks, for the Sony movie that's in association with Marvel characters, Madam Web. The Madam Web trailer is here, folks. It's here. If you want to watch it, the trailer's out. This is the new Madam Web movie starring Dakota Johnson, arguably my favorite woman to live. I love Dakota Johnson more than life itself, probably. I think she is amazing. I love that there is no part of her as an actress that has any urgency to make this scene or make this performance feel like it's impactful or matters or should be intense. My girl just shows up, speaks like she normally speaks, and delivers great performances. I love her to death. She's my favorite person alive. I would watch anything she does. Just like me, she really loves limes, and I really like that about her. And I know she just loves Marvel movies. She loves that, and she's going to give Ellen the what for. She's great. She's great. I love her so much. A Madam Web movie, couldn't give two shits about. I don't care. It's not a cool character. It's from an era of Spider-Man that's associated with the multiverse, but the larger multiverse movies like No Way Home and Across the Spider-Verse have ignored this character and Ezekiel. What's Ezekiel's name? Sims? I don't know. And Morlun. Like, they don't want to deal with that shit. Like a weird vampire, like a weird guy that has like a spider totem. Who cares? And Madam Web, what if she was like young and hot? What if, like, she was Dakota Johnson and she had to, like, protect young Spider-Girls? I don't care. What I do care about is Dakota Johnson being mother to, like, 3 of our up-and-coming stars. I like that a lot. I think that's a really fun and cool thing to do. Like Sydney Sweeney, she's fun. Isabel Massard, she's also going to be Hawkgirl in the Superman Legacy movie. But who cares about that? The Spider-Girls are here, everybody. All of them are here. There are going to be different Spider-Women, and like an evil Spider-Man named Ezekiel Sims is going to show up and try to like, I got to stop you guys before you become Spider people. Who cares? I do, because it's so stupid. Oh my god. What a dumb show. What a dumb show. You know, like why is this happening? I kind of love it, honestly. Like, it's so specific and lame, and that makes me happy. Just how stupid an idea that is. Don't you love that? I love it. I kind of love it. But these are cool girls. I love these girls so much. And they're just going to have fun. Or they're not. I don't really know. I don't know if they're going to have fun. It doesn't sound like anybody was like acting their ass off. They just kind of show up and get paid. But hey, gets paid. This is a whole other conversation we could get into another day. Just the blatant sexism when it comes to genre pieces, where if a star like Jacob Elordi is like, I just gotta work. Or, you know, Jeremy Allen White goes, I don't need to do a fucking Marvel movie. They're like, yeah, you're right, you don't. But if Rachel Ziegler Or Dakota Johnson's like, whatever, this doesn't mean anything to me. Suddenly it's like fucking the end of the world. Like, if Dakota Johnson wants the paycheck, let my babe get the paycheck. You know what I mean? Like, I can't imagine any of the leads in this movie were like, oh yeah, Julia Carpenter, my favorite character. No, they weren't. They weren't. You can't tell me they were. But you know what? Nobody is doing anything with those characters in the comic books now, so what the hell? Put them in this movie. I don't care. It's great. It looks really silly and bad, and the trailer was so disorienting that you can't really tell what's going on. All I know is it has Dakota Johnson, the love of my life, one of my favorite people to ever live, and that's enough to get me in seats. I love Dakota Johnson. Maybe more than anybody else, like as like a person who like follows actors and stuff. Like, I think she's great. Just because, like, no, you are a Nepo baby. You don't need to try hard, sweetie. And I'm here for all of it. And I do think she's talented and she can do a performance if she wants to. But why would she want to? Why commit yourself to something this stupid? I appreciate the earnesty of that. I love it. So this trailer, I can't wait for the movie. Just because I think it looks absolutely horrendous. But that's exactly why I'm excited. I didn't like Morbius or the Venom films. I actually only saw one Venom film. But this new era they're going for, the Madam Web, the Kraven, it sounds stupid. And I do appreciate that so much. Just how ridiculous it is. That's pretty exciting to me. And we're going to stick in the realm of Marvel for a minute to talk about something that we need to just casually bring up. I'm not really somebody who wants to talk about the MCU just because it's not that it's over, but there's no joy in it anymore. They've course corrected immensely. That's not going to save them, I don't think. Like, not that it's like hashtag MCU is over, but we're just out of it now. Like, we don't want this, you know? Hunger Games, I think, is proving the audience wants something different. But when it comes to the Kang Dynasty film, which is the next scheduled Avengers movie for 2026, which is still 3 years away, which I'm like, 3 years from now, I'm going to be nearing 30. Am I going to want to see another Avengers movie? It's crazy to think of. Like, that's really messing with my perception of time. I'm like, oh my God, everything's like, we're getting closer to death. Great. And I don't have Avatar yet. Like, where's Avatar 3, you know? The Seed Bearer. Where is it? I want that more. But Jeff Loveness, he was supposed to write it. He's not writing it anymore. And Daniel Cretton, he's not directing it anymore. So it feels like we're just going to do a huge rehaul of that entire project, make it something entirely different, which maybe that's for the best. Maybe that's for the best. I can't imagine anyone's excited about a Kang Dynasty movie. The thing about it, too, I love Kang in the comic books because he's a terrible character, and it's like, why do we just do so much for him, and it's just insane. I think Kang works best as like a support villain, where he just kind of like shows up and harasses a motherfucker, you know? I don't need to see him like lead a movie. I've already seen that in comics and in cartoons, and it's just fine. And the multiverse is a tired hat at this point. Like, nobody's really amped for a multiverse thing anymore. We burned it so fast. Which is why it's like a good thing that fucking the DCU is starting over. Like, I think that's awesome that they're just like, yeah, we're not going to get these people back in. I appreciate that so much. But I don't know, Kang Dynasty dead on arrival, dare I say? I don't care. I haven't watched Loki or Secret Invasion. I watched The Marvels because I love those cool women, and Nia DaCosta is my choice to direct a Barbarella movie. But I don't know. Maybe we should just let Kang Dynasty die. And Cretton, he's doing Shang-Chi too. I guess. Like, fuck, man. Shang-Chi came out in 2021. By the time they actually get it out, it might be 2026. Which I'm just like, oh my God. I would have lived a life in between the release of the Shang-Chi movies, which is really weird to think about. And also to think about this for a minute, will you all? Do we like Simu Liu? You know, I'm chronically online. I see the culture online turn against people rapidly and quickly. Is Simu Liu a guy where like, yes, the next Simu Liu project? I don't know, because he thinks he's a movie star. He's not a movie star. He's starred in movies, you know? Moving away from the Marvel stuff, let's jump back into the realm of Sydney Sweeney because she had a new trailer come out too for her new movie, Anyone But You. Ugh, gross, ew, anyone but you. Glenn Powell, arguably the sexiest man alive, who's got like, she let me hit because I'm goofy energy, but he's also like, you know, chiseled to be a god amongst men. And there was like a early trailer that played at like some festival or something where it's like atmosphere, sexy people being sexy, and you got no vibe of the plot. This new trailer gives you the entire plot where it's like, ugh, they maybe hooked up one time and they hated each other, but now they're going to pretend that they're in love so they can make like a guy that Sweeney's interested in jealous and like Powell's ex. And hey, that's a high concept rom-com idea. I'm here for it. I like that stuff. I want more of those in cinemas because you kind of just need the fluff to show up sometimes, you know? I have okay. Okay. This trailer was weird because I don't know if they have chemistry. Isn't that a weird thing to say about two of like the hottest white people working today? Sweeney is talented, right? Like, she's really good on Euphoria. And then I think every other subsequent thing I've seen her in, especially in like a film, I'm questioning if she's ever talented, which is such a weird thing to say. She's in Madam Web. You couldn't tell she was excited to be there. And in this one, I don't know if she's like, I guess she's kind of like playing the straight man to Powell because he's kind of like the goofball. There's some times where she does it authentically. Maybe she's like too like picture perfect pretty to be like, oh, she's silly. Like she doesn't have like that silly face about her where you're like, this is a comedy person. Maybe that works. Maybe she is funny. I don't know. I'm not getting that vibe from the trailer. And Powell, he makes it look so easy. Like he can just show up, take his clothes off and be like, yeah, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have gotten naked. And it's funny. But is he a movie star? Like, I feel like he should be a movie star. He should be at this point, but he's not. And it's really weird in an awkward situation. I don't know. It all feels hollow and annoying. And their chemistry is very mixed a lot of the time. So you're like, oh, come on, guys. I'm rooting for you. I'm rooting for you to do something good here. But I'm not sold, which really sucks. But I cannot wait to see this movie just because I want to see how Sydney Sweeney's going to do as Barbarella if we actually get that. She seems to be Sony's girl right now. So I guess that's a positive. But I don't know. It doesn't look that good. Let's take a quick break, folks. And when we come back from said break, let's jump back into the world of that failed app that was DC Universe. God help us all. All right, folks, allow me to paint a picture for you because we have to go back a little bit, just a little bit, to a time where things just seemed a little bit brighter. This is a world that is before the pandemic of the novel coronavirus. This is the year 2019 when Doom Patrol Season 1 made its way on the streaming service known as, get this, folks, you might have forgotten about this, but I didn't, DC Universe. There was a time before Warner Brothers was kind of falling apart, and was this pre-AT&T as well or during AT&T? I guess it kind of makes sense if they wanted an app for the AT&T stuff, but whatever. So before Warner Brothers fell apart and streaming services were still all the rage, I say all the rage loosely, it was not all the rage. There was this thing happening where everybody wanted to make a streaming service for themselves. And in 2018, DC launched their own streaming service called DC Universe. This would be solely for DC content. You'd get the old stuff dropped on the service, I guess, like some old movies and animated stuff that we're still being able to put on there. Some licensing stuff prevented certain shows and whatever from going on that service, but they were all there. On top of that, there would be original content produced solely, my friends, for that network. Shows you might have heard of, like the animated Harley Quinn series, which is the only one of the shows that is still alive, and it just got renewed. Of course, there was Doom Patrol, and Doom Patrol was meant to be a spin-off of the show called Titans. Titans was like their big premiere show, where it's like, what if the Titans? And then James Wan produced a Swamp Thing TV series. And then there was Stargirl. All of those shows existing on a network called DC Universe. All of them existing on an app that lasted maybe 3 years. Because I believe it was in 2021 the app was shut down. All of those shows got bounced to other networks. Some of them went to Adult Swim. Some of them went to the CW. Doom Patrol became an HBO Max original, finding itself amongst the ranks of that programming. But I find it so fascinating because the DC Universe is a failed experiment, and we've seen a couple of them happen since like this new like app-based streaming whatever took over, Quibi being another big example. You can't have just exclusive content for DC. There's not an audience big enough for that to happen. The DC audience is not large enough to solely have their own streaming service, which is why that app failed. They tried to integrate comics onto it. It kind of became the DC Infinite app later on, where you could like just get your comic books on there, which is just them ripping off the Marvel Unlimited app, which is fine. I don't really use it. I just buy my comics regularly. It's strange, but whatever. You know, it's crazy. I love the idea that they were just so confident that they could have the app work, and it'd be like its own continuity in its own universe, and the Titans would be there, so Batman would have existed, and you know, the Doom Patrol exists in the same universe as the JSA, and then Swamp Thing would bring in its own universe with people like Blue Devil and all that. It's kind of interesting to think about, and I think there's something cool about that to exist. But it was never going to last. It had no intention of lasting. It couldn't. Because what are you going to do? You're just going to make shows in that universe and you're just going to watch things in that universe? It's not going to last. And it didn't. It lasted a couple of years and everything got shuffled around. But one of the premiere shows on that was Doom Patrol. Now, it was not the first show to come out. That would be Titans. And Titans premiered. They had an episode where Garfield was connected to the Doom Patrol. So in an episode of Titans, they go to the Doom Patrol, and there was some characters on that show that would make it to the actual Doom Patrol TV series. Solely April Bowlby, I think, was the only one to get pulled over because they had other people play Niles and Robot Man and Larry. But we see that Rita Farr was the only cast member that was able to like move over to the actual show, which is good because April Bowlby is fantastic. And we'll talk about them all in a minute here, but it was loosely connected to the Titans show. And then when they're going to get their own actual spin-off, I say spin-off loosely, their own TV series, we can get no higher profile cast members to join. We're going to bring over the ones we like April Bowlby, because she's great, and I can't wait to talk about that character. We are going to have more named actors do some of the voice work for our more prominent male characters, because when it comes to the Doom Patrol, a lot of the more prominent male characters are kind of like hidden under certain aesthetics. So Matt Bomer would do the voice for Larry Traynor, Negative Man, and Matthew Zuck would do like the physical embodiment of him. Something I do want to point out, while I might not bring up Zuck or Shanahan that much, who also does like the physical work for Cliff, they are important cast members, and when they finally got top billing, when they are actually on the opening credits, that is one of the best things that this show did. They deserve that. They needed that. So Matt Bomer does the stuff where Larry's not in the bandages, does the voice work. Matthew Zuck does the physical embodiment. And then for Cliff Steele, we get Brendan Fraser to do the actual voice for Cliff every time Cliff is out of the suit and we see him just walking around IRL. And Riley Shanahan would do the physical suit of Cliff, which worked really well. So heavy hitters. To do your Professor X adjacent character, you have to get somebody of note. And we got Timothy Dalton, which one of my favorite castings. Something I will commend the DC movies and TV shows for doing is casting ex-James Bonds in a role that suits them perfectly. Dalton as Niles Calder, a great choice. Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Fate, a good choice. One of those isn't a better thing than the other one, but that doesn't matter. Now we just need Daniel Craig to be like Ivo or something. That'd be pretty cool. So those are good casting. Diane Guerrero shows up. She plays Crazy Jane, and you're like, okay, that's our cast. And in the first season, we actually have a primary villain, and his name is Alan Tudyk playing Mr. Nobody, and that's really cool too. So those are like the Doom Patrol characters, where you're like, okay, I like that. You know, like those are, you got some really good names in there. People that are good on television. Matt Bomer still hasn't really made the jump to movies yet. April Bowlby kind of willing to spearhead this thing. Brendan Fraser still on his like Renaissance era coming out of the ground. And you're like, okay, Alan Tudyk, he's kind of like the face of the DC Universe app right now. He's on Harley Quinn doing multiple voices. So it's kind of like his show for a bit. And then there's another casting that is so genuinely surprising, where we have Jovan Wade playing Victor Stone, Cyborg, which Cyborg, not really a character that is Doom Patrol adjacent. There is some crossover sometimes. But I think the intention was more like Vic would show up here and he might be like the bridge that we use to gap between this and Titans. And then when Titans became too self-serious, he kind of just existed in his own bubble over here now on Doom Patrol. And it works well because he's a young guy compared to this cast. Like, you know, they're not all old actors. They just play older characters. So he is the voice of the modern generation that works in this. And that's like essentially the cast for the first season. Now, as we get further along into the show, we have other people show up, of course. Dalton will leave because he's better than this, apparently. Michelle Gomez will show up and she'll be Madame Rouge for a bit. We will have Dorothy show up and be an actual character a couple of times. And we have a bunch of just fun surprises like that. Later on in the show, you know, Space Casey, she'll show up for a bit, played by Madeline Zima, and you're like, that's really fun. It's good. I think it's really good. Like, just how they have used those characters. I think it's really impressive. And, I don't know. It's, I said at the beginning of the show, but I do think it's, like, my favorite live-action comic book adaptation. I was never the big Doom Patrol guy. I am a big Grant Morrison fan, and their era of Doom Patrol is probably the most quintessential, I think, to the comic book fandom at large. It was definitely like an old DC property that managed to find its footing in the Vertigo era and become something so transcendent and different that it created its own audience that is solely into that. It's also a very like androgynous and just kind of like pseudo-sexual narrative of like identity and finding your place in that, which is something the show explores too. And I appreciate that a lot for just taking those types of chances. And then I think like the more contemporary stuff with Doom Patrol, like Gerard Way taking on the title, Dennis Culvener doing it right now, it's interesting stuff. And these characters getting some prominence again is really exciting because they do feel like an old school comic book team, like the JSA, where there is something you could say about them in the present day. And maybe the further you get removed from like their origin and conception, the more interesting it gets what these characters become, which is pretty cool and pretty fun. This show is just perfect. It's one of the best balances of like tone between what the comic book it's based on is and how we interpret that on screen. There's a bunch of just like, for every comic book property, we have to like inflate things or change things a little bit so it fits into like the narrative of television. But the thing was, Doom Patrol in that era that we're basing it off of was just so episodic, where it's just like we can just stand alone and watch these people be miserable for a minute, and then it just becomes so much more intense that way. The comic book reads just like this tragedy, this operatic thing, but it's on like this really weird and interesting scale where the escalation just goes higher and higher and higher, and it goes crazy. And that's really impressive, especially when it's comic book stuff. There is a tendency by some companies or just some showrunners to maybe skew away from the more outlandish stuff happening in a comic book. We don't want to get too crazy, but Doom Patrol really leaned into it in multiple aspects. Every character's power is what it is supposed to be in the comic books. We take so many just one-off villains and bring them in here. You know, Dr. Time shows up, the Brain and Monsala Mansour show up in here. We have the Candlemaker show up in this for a minute too. You know, like everybody shows up and just gets the job done. I think that's a really impactful and cool thing to see this show do. And it just becomes something solely original when all these other shows or all these other superhero projects are just this big outlandish thing where we'll do like a wink and a nod to this being weird. The way Doom Patrol handles like the talking butts, the ant farm, Flex Mentallo, everything, they're just like, what the fuck is happening? Which is such a interesting and realistic take on this stuff where it's just so much better. It's less like, oh man, I can't believe we're wearing these goofy costumes. And it's just more like, is that goat? Or no, it's a donkey, right? Did everything in this town just get sucked into that donkey's asshole? And you're like, yep, it just did. And they're like, what the fuck does that mean? Which is so much more interesting than just being like what just happened, you know? And that's like, this is an adult property. It delves into so many adult themes and goes to some disturbing, terrifying ideologies. And I really think that works to the benefit of this show. So it did come out on this app that was hard to watch the show on. Eventually it found its way to other networks. The first season of Doom Patrol is inarguably, to me, one of the best first seasons of any television show ever made, where the first episode is such a good pilot. It just gives you all these characters. It gives you their backstory. The money that is poured into it is fantastic. And then there's like a false team up, and you're like, oh, are we really good at this? Not really. And everything just kind of gets crazier and crazier. We have to find Niles. Mr. Nobody is narrating. Mr. Nobody, still probably my favorite villain the show had, but I do think the other villains get really interesting, and they're really good. And in the first season, we get Danny the Street, which is amazing. Like, can you imagine in 2019 another comic book show giving us a Danny the Street? Can you? Like, I can't. I think that's insane. We had the Beard Hunter show up too, and that's crazy. And then Flex Mentallo. I remember at the time when this episode came out on television, I was talking with one of my friends who's like a huge comic book guy like me, and he loves like the MCU and the DCU and stuff. And I said, and I stand by this. I stand by this statement. I stand by this. The way they handled Flex Mentallo in one episode of Doom Patrol is better than the MCU has handled any character. He is just, you buy the emotion so well. You buy how he becomes this man, where he's trapped in, how he has to get out. And then suddenly he's just like, I was this thing I never thought I'd have to be. Now I have to be something different. I love it so much. He's one of like the most physical representations of like the entire conception of Doom Patrol's motto, which is just, you have to let your freak flag fly, and you have to be comfortable showing this part of yourself to other people. And the Flex Mentallo episodes are just so good at doing that. And then it just leads them to saving Niles, and that's when they learn that Niles has a daughter named Dorothy, and that leads us into the second season, which the second season does get affected by COVID. I should point that out there. They are unable to finish the episode. Is it this season? Yeah, I think it's this season, right? Or am I thinking of the next one? I can't remember. It's got to be this season, right? That is affected, like the finale is affected. Because in this one, they like awaken and they're like small, and Larry has to like keep them together. And then things just start to escalate more. They meet Dr. Time in this one, where it's like, can we find a way to get Niles back and he can watch his daughter and all that kind of stuff. And that's when Dorothy becomes a more mainstay character, and we see like the spider in her mind and the candle maker and all that stuff. It's interesting. And well, I don't think this is like as strong as the first season. It does have some moments where you're like, oh, we didn't really like need to delve into that. I do think it's very good, and I think it's a very fun and interesting show. And kind of in like the third season, we pick things up a little bit more, going into like a little bit of a more like insane direction. This is where like Mala and the Brain show up. Garjuax the Decimator shows up in this season. This is where we see that Madame Rouge is going to become a bigger part of the team. We also, and this is kind of interesting to you people out there who like this kind of stuff, the third season is where we're introduced to the Dead Boy Detectives. Now, the Dead Boy Detectives were supposed to be a spin-off on HBO Max, that because of all the bullshit shuffling and Neil Gaiman not wanting that to happen at Warner Brothers, the Dead Boy Detective TV show that was supposedly going to be a spin-off of Doom Patrol is now going to Netflix to be kind of like connected to like the Sandman universe. So think about that however you want. They also go to the world of the undead. This is kind of also where we get like the Sisterhood of Dada, which is just the Rita and Rouge stuff from the past. And that is also where we start getting more into like the butts becoming the big problems. It's really fun and interesting. And it's kind of stupid. And this is where they start to like actually try to become a team, which is kind of interesting and fun. And then we get the fourth season, which is the one that started in November of last year. The first 6 episodes came out, and then they went on hiatus up until October of this year. That is like 10 months. What? And yes, Warner Brothers fell apart at that time, and so did HBO Max, but like that is a very long hiatus for the last 6 episodes. Now, the final season is kind of disjointed, and some things don't really pay off perfectly. We have Orgwith and Immortus kind of like being the main bad guys in this one, and the butts and that kind of stuff. And we kind of rush through that plot pretty quick because we now know it's the final season, so we're just going to get to the final season and do that stuff that way. And I think that's fine. You know, there's some time travel shenanigans. We wrap it up well. And for the most part, I do like where we end the show. We'll talk about that a little bit more at the end, but as it stands, I would say in terms of the seasons, I would go 1, 3, 4, 2. I don't have anything against the second season or the fourth season. It's so hard to beat that first season because we really weren't doing what that show was doing at the time it came out. And then kind of, I know this isn't like a show that was successful to everybody, but what we were doing there is so special and so unique. And I think a part of that is just how character focused this show was. I love a lot of superhero TV programming. I think it works better than movies because these are serialized stories. It can't end. It has to go on forever. And I really disliked the way the DC Universe apps, like TV shows, handled that. Swamp Thing was phenomenal. And I think Stargirl is really good too. I really like that show a lot. Stargirl and Doom Patrol, the only comic book... Is that true now? I'm trying to think. When was the last time I cried during one of these? I think Stargirl and Doom Patrol are still the only two like superhero live action things that have made me cry, like openly weep. Stargirl because I'm like, I can't believe I'm seeing something I never thought I would see. Doom Patrol because I'm like, I love these characters more than life itself. And they're being handled with such brevity and perfect agency. And that's what I love the Doom Patrol because it's the anti-superhero story where you have these people with incredible abilities and powers who don't want to be special, who don't want to have it. And they are a bunch of sad sacks who are broken and can never be healed. And that's the premise for the entire 4 seasons, which I kind of love. It's only in like the last episode where any of them truly learn that they have to let go of this grief and this anguish and actually leave each other to heal better. Because you have all of these broken people together, they don't actually heal. They can never actually fully grow into who they're supposed to be. I love that immensely. It is one of my favorite things that this show explores, is just that No matter how much they try, they still wind up in their sad, destructive habits. They can never leave that. Larry might believe he can be better and try something new, be a better father, but he's going to fall back on his old habits. Rita might think she can be a face of something new, but she falls back into her insecurities like that. Cliff wants to be a better father. He wants to be connected with these lives, but he's afraid of the time he has left. Jane doesn't know how to heal her own psychosis, and she can't escape that feeling. And even Niles is like, I lied to these people and I made them into a family, but I can never truly admit to myself that I needed them the way they needed me. It's all great. And even Vic, like, what they do with fucking Cyborg on the Doom Patrol show is the type of story we will never see from Cyborg again. I'm sorry if you are a massive Cyborg fan. This is the best version you're ever going to see of that character. This is exactly how you write him. He is cocky, he is a headstrong hero, but the more he learns about his family and his father and himself, he starts to realize maybe he's not the person in control of who he is. He wants to change himself. Is he Victor Stone or is he Cyborg? What is he allowed to be? Does he want to be the hero, or is he going to fall victim to being trapped in with the Doom Patrol where he can never escape those pains? He goes through so much trauma and experience in these episodes. He is the young, headstrong character, shows up, wants to turn them into a superhero team. They all make fun of him for it. And then as his story progresses, he loses a relationship with his father. He reconnects it again. He starts to fall into traps. Maybe the technology on him is controlling him. Maybe he could have become whole again if his father wanted him to, but it was easier this way to have him become this thing that he could weaponize. And you're like, this is a Doom Patrol show, and Cyborg is getting more agency than he did in the Justice League movie and many other adaptations. Like, Jovan Wade is not an actor I'm too familiar with, but he delivered Victor to new heights and things we have never seen from that character again. Like, this is giving Victor and Cyborg the same treatment as the Doom Patrol, which is really interesting to think about, because then you're like, could we slot any other superhero onto the Vic Stone pedestal, plop them into the Doom Patrol story, and they go through like the same journey to becoming the whole version of themselves who are finally happy with how they look and who they are? It's really interesting to think about. It's such a good use of that character, and it makes him into something he has never been before, and that is likable and whole, and it's really impressive. I dig that so much, and he's probably like the most happy throughout the piece, but he also gets very dark, and that's kind of disturbed. I just dig it so much. This is the best cast show I think any superhero thing has ever had. I stand by that. I 100% stand by that. I love each and every one of these actors. I can't imagine anybody else taking on these roles in any other interpretation. I fear we're going to try to recast the Doom Patrol at some point, but if it were up to me, which it isn't, I would just slot all of these people back into the roles for whatever new thing you're doing and just give it a new continuity. So let's kind of break this down a little bit. Let's start with what I think is a really inspired casting choice, even if it is just his voice, and that is Brendan Fraser doing Robot Man. He is Cliff Steele. He's kind of like, we open up with him. We open up the show with Cliff's perspective. We end the show with Cliff's perspective. He's essentially the main guy that we follow. I say that loosely. We follow them all for different reasons. This is Fraser, still in that period where he's not really back. So it's kind of just like a work for hire job for him. But even a work for hire job from Fraser is phenomenal. And it's just voice work that he's doing for most of it. But my God, he perfectly embodies that character. He makes it feel alive. And like there's some anger inside of him. He is the most broken. He is like the least human out of all of them. And that is because he's just like a brain in a box. But he conveys so much terror and fear. He's the most angry at the world and is the one that's like, fuck yeah, we did this. Let's keep this going, without really doing like some of the emotional beats in the larger group. He is very much just trying to find his way in a world that doesn't want him. It's such a good performance, even as a voice performance. Utterly fantastic. And Riley Shanahan does so good with the physicality of the character. And it's amazing how good that suit looks for the 4 seasons. Like, we kept that thing up and it looks fantastic. And his arc is so interesting because you start to realize he wants to be a good person. He realizes that he's kind of like a piece of shit. He's kind of fallen into the traps of his own father, so he wants to be a better father, but he messed up with his daughter. So he has two people in his life he wants to be a better father for now, essentially. One of them is his grandson, which is like later on in the story where he finds out his daughter is pregnant. He's like, I messed up with you. I couldn't be there for you. I want to try to be better for my grandson. And then with Jane, which is, I really, really, really love the dynamic between Cliff and Jane in this entire show. I think it is one of the best portrayals of the surrogate family that we see in this type of genre piece, especially in comic books, where you're like, these are two people who are angry at the world. They do not like each other, but they need each other, and they do love each other to the point where they want to have each other at all times, you know? And just the surrogate father and daughter situation where he wants to help her and she doesn't want to admit that she actually wants to be with him and care about him. It is really good stuff and a great counteraction to the Rita and Larry relationship. Every time there's like a scene where Jane finally lets herself be vulnerable with Cliff, it's some of my favorite stuff. And Cliff becoming that fatherly figure as the show progresses, even if he's like the angry drunk uncle, it's really impressive. My God, it's such a good show. Oh my God, I love it so much. And Cliff's journey to where he's going to end up is really great. He actually goes through a lot. He loses his body for a bit. He gets Parkinson's, which is like, that's a really interesting development for him. That kind of comes later on in the show when like they all start to lose their longevity, which is like another element of the show of just these people are immortal. They are just kind of like left alive because Niles wanted to find a way to keep his daughter alive. But now that Niles is gone and Dorothy wants to live her own life, what do you do with the leftovers? That is the Doom Patrol. And Cliff is one of the angriest people about that. And even he's like, I can't stay mad at you because now I have a way to see my grandson. And I'm like, that's so beautiful. What a great thing to happen in that show. God, I love this show. I just love this show. I can't do it justice just talking about these characters. Like, it is so impressive. It's so much fun. I love it immensely. And I guess let's take that and jump over to what might be the hardest character to portray in live action, which is Crazy Jane or it's Kay Chalice. Like, how do you do that? And this is where if we had to do this show as a mature rating, because if we wanted to put Crazy Jane in, like, you know, a PG-13 show, you couldn't get the emotional depth of that. Right off the bat, Diane Guerrero is asked to do the impossible, and that is play like 64 different people. And I know she doesn't like physically do it every single time, but she does have a lot of different looks. And when we go to the underground, it's like a really cool metaphor for just a cracked identity and like losing yourself. She is so good because she has to play angry and happy and sad and destructive so many different times, and each different personality that she takes control of. They do a lot of different makeup choices with her, and it's just really impressive to see all that she can become. I really like that. Like, this is a character that is hard to do because of the tragedy involved with it, and to accurately like portray the broken nature of Kay's mind. How do you do that? But they did it well. You know, this kind of leads again into like why Cliff is the father figure, because she has such a strained relationship with her father, and all that stuff is so interesting to explore. When you're delving into like the psyche stuff and we're going to somebody's mind, that can be very tired. I think in a lesser show or just in like a random episode of a show, you have like, we have to go inside this character's mind and it's different. But portraying the underground as like this place where you can take a train to the mind and now you are the one that's in charge. But the entire seasons, all the episodes, all 4 seasons, all 46 episodes, this is Jane's journey figuring out that she has to find a way to connect all of the different personalities together and unify them under one umbrella. That is so interesting. And they portray it just with like this secret atrocity that has happened to Kay when she was younger, which fractured her mind, which led to her having this ability to live forever, I guess. It's kind of, I don't know how much I want to get into that, but that is intense, and it's like this clear thing where she's broken and has trust issues, and she could portray that well. But the last time I like really cried in this show was the wrap up of Jane and the other personalities like confessing to themselves and to Niles in like the final episodes that this atrocity is not just Kay, it's all of them. They were there when it happened. They were a part of the situation that led to that happening. And it was just so cathartic. Like, it's finally allowing Jane to accept that they have to move on. Like, they have to become something else now. And that's beautiful because this is a show about trauma. It's about people who experience hardships and can't escape that and are not willing to move past it, and they always fall back into their habits. That is what this show is. Every time they get close to happiness or solving a problem, Jane breaks away from Cliff. Larry realizes he can't be happy. Rita realizes she can't be a leader. They fall back into their broken, destructive habits. And that is so heartbreaking because you both want them to be happy, but realize they are who they are because they can't allow themselves to be happy. And that is just wholly terrifying to think about. And I think one of the most like prominent displays of that comes from Larry Trainor. And Negative Man, there's just a lot going on in there. And you have to find a right way to portray that. And just like with Fraser, Matt Bomer gets how to do this voice. Like, he is perfect for this. I can't think of a better actor working today than Matt Bomer, who can perfectly like represent like repressed homosexual tendency. I feel like when he came out, it was like a big deal because everyone's like, this is the next guy. And then he kind of got trapped in the television bubble and he wasn't allowed to like truly move on. So this is a character that works for him. When we're introduced to Larry, he's in the military, hiding his sexuality. And then he spends a good part of his later in life, after he meets like the spirit or like the energy, the negative energy. He's in the ant farm. He's tortured. He cannot allow himself to feel anything or change from anything but that. He's scared to be vulnerable. Look, the bandages are both a metaphor for just like he's unable to show his true self to the world, and he needs them literally because he might destroy anybody in proximity to him if he's not wearing them. It is funny and it's on the nose, but that's the point. And Larry just becomes the sad sack, wet blanket, where it's like he will find moments to be happy, find moments where he can care, but he'll never allow himself to fully embrace or accept what his life should be. He will be the most reluctant to do the hero stuff. He'll be the most reluctant to fall in love. There's a few times where he wants to be a better father, but he messes up with his own son, messes up with his grandson, can never fully accept that. And with the negative spirit, this other being inside of him that is someone who doesn't get along with him either. He's just surrounded by these people that will expect different things from him. He can never be what he wants them to be. And I find that to be fully interesting. And Matthew Zuck really embodies that well. There's just like a Charlie Brown adjacent energy to Larry throughout the entire show. And I think that is just so compelling and fun to see. Larry, the character I think I relate to the most on the show is probably Larry, just because I know that energy of like, why let yourself open up, become vulnerable this way when you can hurt the ones in your love. And even though you want to be, the person who's loving and all that stuff, you're going to be trapped in the ways of your cynicism. You can never escape that. I really respond to that. I love it so much. Larry is also in my favorite moment of the show. I've said this before. I've said it on multiple places. I'll continue to say it until something better happens. My favorite scene in any comic book property that's been adapted is the sequence in the first season of Doom Patrol. I believe it's in the episode. I believe it's in Danny Patrol, where Larry and Vic have to go to Danny the street to find their friends, and we're going to like the cabaret, and Morally Corrupt tries to get Larry to sing on stage, And then we see Larry reluctantly gets up. He starts singing People Like Us by Kelly Clarkson. And that is Larry accepting who he wants to be. That is Larry admitting to himself, this is what I want. I want to be happy and free and not be surrounded by these bandages or bondages that is holding me back. And he does the duet. He morphs from the bandages into Matt Bomer, and he's just like the happiest he's been. The truest Larry has ever been is being able to express himself both for his sexuality and both for what he wants the world to see him as, this loving, caring person. And then we see as the song goes on, which is just a beautiful song and a beautiful performance by those two actors, Larry didn't actually do it. He didn't actually take that step, and he's just like, sorry, I don't sing, and he shoves the microphone out of the face, and he leaves the cabaret. Which is, it's my favorite sequence in the show. It's my favorite sequence in any comic book thing, because that is just that's just nailing what the tone of this show is, what this character is. Here's the bombastic, outlandish, colorful event happening, and these are characters that are like, no, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. Just let me die in peace and be alone forever. And I love that energy from this show. It works so freaking well, and it's such a cool use of these characters. It's so good. And I think Larry's ending, it might be a little cheesy, but I also think it's the most cathartic for him as a character, because he needed that kind of just like, I'm allowed to love. He can be a different father now, because halfway through the show, he loses the original negative spirit that's in him, and it fathers this new one called Keeg, which is just this like young baby one. And now he's like, okay, I have the chance to be the father I never was. Maybe now I can do right by this child. And that becomes his own personal, trapping. And can he do it? Maybe he can. It's crazy. And I love Matt Bomer. I love Diane Guerrero. I love Brendan Fraser. I love Jovan Wade. Now, it's so hard to say that because I think all those other actors are talented, but I think my favorite casting in the show is April Bowlby as Rita Farr. Now, I have always liked Rita, one of my favorite characters, because it's like, this is an old school Hollywood actress now becoming like a Lasta woman, like this talented character, like a named character in the DC universe. Oh, her introduction is fantastic. Probably the most fascinating storyline that she goes through, because all of Rita's stuff is just like, she's this perfect product, and then these insecurities start to fill up inside her, and she gets sucked into this way. Like, she is a very reluctant hero at the beginning, and then slowly she starts to become like the team leader, which is really interesting because she is the oldest of them next to Niles, but when Niles leaves, she becomes the oldest, so she takes on the maternal authority of just, I'm going to keep this family together because that's what we are, a family. I never had a family, and I love you all, even if I don't express it in the proper ways. But I want to keep us together. I want us to be happy here. And she both becomes the team leader for the Doom Patrol and the leader of the family, like the matriarch of the household, which is really cool. And it gives her different relationships with everybody. Like her relationship with Larry, because they were like the first two there, is really impressive. And it's one of my favorite dynamics where she right away could see who he was and he accepted that. And that's why they were able to connect. And he was just interested in her and her life, and they had that chemistry, but Larry was never able to talk about her or be vulnerable with her, and it was always about him, and you're just like, that's such an interesting use of that. I really dig that. It's so much fun. And then as we get Madame Rouge in there, because we have like a separate story halfway through the show where Rita goes on her own journey, and she kind of like goes back to like the sisterhood of Dada, and she's like finding herself there. She falls in love with like a nice guy, and then Rouge becomes the antithesis to her life, and they start to fight. And then her slowly realizing like, we all did bad stuff and we've all made mistakes. I can't be mad at you for that. I just want you to do better. Which is such like a maternal thing to do. And I love it so much. And April just really nailed like that talking in like that old school energy where the certain tone of voice changes and her body movements are so subtle and all that. She did it well. Like she just perfectly embodied that, became exactly what she needed to be, and delved into so many interesting aspects of her life. And I think Maybe Rita went on like the most extreme journey where like she went through people from her past reemerging, just seeing her past and how she became who she is, accidentally killing people and becoming a monster she never wanted to be, being perceived as a monster, and just the insecurities that there's other people around her that are just more talented and she cannot actually like be this person. Like she can't be the actress anymore, which is really interesting. And I think that's perfectly present when you see like they start doing like the musicals and Cloverton and all that stuff, and she's not the most talented one in the room. It's really fascinating. And the ending for Rita is very curious. I think what they do with her works well because it's the catharsis of her being like, I want to be young and beautiful forever and still be this glimmering hope of what I used was. But as the show goes on, she realizes like, I can't be that person anymore. I have to both grow up, deal with the stuff that has affected me, get through my insecurities and my trauma, and then maybe I will find my happiness in another life, which is so cathartic and cool. And it's perfect. And I cannot see anybody but April doing this role. She just perfectly nails it, perfectly encapsulates what that needs to feel like. She just understands that this is intense, this is prominent. We have to explore these themes and these ideas. God, it's so good. It is so good. She's given so much to do, and I really appreciate that. It's amazing that this show, for 4 seasons, managed to take the characters of Elasta Woman, Negative Man, and Robot Man, and Crazy Jane, and flesh them out where it both feels like they're not progressing as characters, they feel like they're making the same mistakes and being trapped in this rhythm, to ultimately letting them all move on from these traumas that have affected them their whole lives and giving them a cathartic ending. So I guess we could talk about the ending a little bit. It just came out a couple weeks ago. This is it. It's done, Patrol. It's over. We have nothing left to tell in this universe, I guess. This entire last season has been about them losing their longevity. So that kind of gives it like this timely ending where they can now die and there could be real consequences for them. And we kind of have like the Immortus plotline and the Butts being like antagonists, but we wrap that up fairly quick. And Immortus is like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I was mad, but now I'm okay. So here's a way you can live forever. But before they can, Rita ultimately succumbs to her age. And she turns into one of the ghosts in, like, the sex ghost part of the house. And she says, it's okay. I'm okay to die. You don't have to come back and save me. I am happy that I made it to this point in my life, that I'm actually willing to accept who I am, and I'm happy with who I am. Which does feel good for Rita. I am sad to see her die, but I understand why that had to happen. And then the rest of the team learns to move on. You know, Vic goes back to Detroit to work with Derek, and they start to build up the next generation of people in robotics. We see that Rouge goes back to the ant farm and just starts to burn it down, where she starts to be like a force for chaotic good. I appreciate that. Jane and Cliff say their goodbyes, and she finds herself running off to space with Space Casey, which is really nice. She finds her happiness, and that's really cool. I like that a lot. It's a good ending for Jane because she can finally connect with somebody on a physical, emotional level, something she was never able to do, and she got to say goodbye to her dad and Cliff. And I really like that. And Cliff got to see one of his kids essentially find themselves and find their footing. And he did one thing right by Jane, and it's a really cathartic ending, and I really like it. And then Larry gets to have his ending with Rama, so him and Keeg, they save Rama, and they fly away, and he's able to have his final moments before their energy explodes together and keeps the world at bay. And you're like, damn, Larry got to go out on top with the man he loved, and that's really cool. And then Cliff. We started the show with Cliff. We got to see him when he gets first in the accident where Niles takes his brain. He manages to get home to his daughter and see his son, and see his grandson, I should say, but his body freezes up, and there's a gift he got from Immortus, which was this crystal, and he realizes when the time comes, he'll know what to do. So he looks inside the crystal, and he gets to see Rory grow up. He gets to see his grandson make all the mistakes he made, including messing up with his wife and finally learning to be a better person when he has his grandson, which is, I'm at this point, okay, losing Rita, one of my favorite characters. I'm like, it's good, it's working, I like it. The Larry stuff had me heartbroken. I was really happy for like Jane and Casey stuff, and I was really happy for like Vic and Rouge. But the stuff here with Cliff, like this final stuff with Cliff, where he's just like, okay, I I did okay. I got to see it. I made it home. And he got to be with his daughter and his grandson. If even for a minute, he got to see that they were going to be okay. His daughter was going to live a full life. His grandson was going to live a full life, and he was going to have his own grandson. Even if he made mistakes, he still got to be with his family when he deserved it. And I'm like, fuck, man. Cliff got his happy ending. He got to see he did something right by his entire family, both the Doom Patrol and Jane, and by his daughter and his grandson. And with that, he is finally home, and he is able to shut down, and his eyes stop glowing, and he is gone. And I'm like, we start this with the birth of Robot Man. We end it with the death of Robot Man. And oh my God, like I'm just a mess at this point. I'm like, are you kidding me? This was so emotional and so intense, and it was so well done. And I didn't talk about like a lot of like the technical stuff, but sometimes the visual effects weren't great. We lost more money in the later seasons, and we had COVID to deal with, but that doesn't matter. The costumes are fantastic, and the outfits are fantastic. The cinematography is fantastic. I think the writing is exceptionally sharp and poignant. That stuff is all amazing. It is one of the best looking shows out there. And they managed to hold it together all these seasons. Got a little chaotic at times with some of the effects, but they made it work. A practical cyborg suit, a practical Robot Man suit. Would they even attempt to do that on a movie? Or would those just be people in green screen? You know? I think that's amazing. And all the supporting cast is great. Dorothy was great. Niles was great. Willoughby showed up in every season. He was pretty fun. Mr. Nobody was really cool. A great addition to the first season. It's amazing that this show managed to get to 4 seasons. Like, this concept is so anti-comic book movie stuff that the fact we even got to 4 seasons and 46 episodes feels amazing. It lasted longer than Stargirl and Swamp Thing and Titans. It outlasted them all. I think because it's so different that it was able to find its niche audience to grow. But these last couple of episodes are just kind of lost in the shuffle of everything going on in Hollywood. That it's a shame the actors couldn't promote it. I haven't seen a lot of promotion for it. It's just a crime that we're going to lose this in the fodder. You know, I was saying this to somebody the other day. If you wanted to just have Doom Patrol connected to the new DC universe, Joven can show back up as Vic having experienced all of this trauma, and the Doom Patrol could be a team that is only referred to in passing. I think you could do that. They do reference the Justice League in the show because it was kind of connected to the DCEU, kind of. But you could just have that be the case. Like, I honestly think if you were to just say that all these characters are gone, Rita is dead, Cliff is dead, Larry is dead, Niles is dead, and Jane's off doing something else, Vic is the last one, I don't think you could do it better. So just saying that they're all dead at this point in the continuity of the DCU is better than them attempting to do it 10 years from now. I don't know if we'll ever attempt the Doom Patrol again. I don't know how you get it better than this, but it's crazy to think it worked. It's so crazy to think it worked. I love this show. I could probably sit here and talk about it all day, like very specific moments that I love, very specific beats that I think are fantastic, but I've taken up too much of your time already. I just want to say, like, this is how you do it. This is how you tell this kind of a story. This is why we should tell these kind of stories. Like, the exact opposite of the comic book stuff people are expecting is the stuff we should be doing. And that's really cool. I'm glad this show got its ending. A little premature. I could have gone a little longer, but maybe it's better to know there is finality to it than to be dragged out forever. So that's pretty exciting. And I love this show. I love these actors. I'm curious to see the future of the Doom Patrol, and I hope it's good. So thank you all for watching this episode. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And as always, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.